the play.
To be equally blunt, only God knows how. And he has not yet chosen to reveal his holy will to us mortals. I pray he will do so soon. Classical theory says that if the body's humor are balanced, patients in good health. If they are out of balance, sickness results and treatment should be given according to the ancient text. But theory is not saving patients, especially the young. Our children are dying. I don't know why, but this time we are burying more children than before. And the old people, too, seem to be suffering much worse than in the last outbreak.
So, Doctor, what you're telling us is there's nothing you can do?
The place for some of us to change our thinking. Now I deal with the body as it is, not as the classic texts assume it to be. I treat by observation and examination, even surgery. And some of my patients, a few do recover.
But how soon before there's a cure? Doctor, thank you. So the medical world is still searching for answers. What about the church? We now rejoin Ciboletto of Zimbabwe in Paris.
It has to be said, the church is not coping very well. It's not been able to provide the comfort and support people need. For all its authority, the church is made up of individuals, men and women who act like men and women everywhere, some with hope and courage, others with cowardice and despair.
As long as there are sick who need us, we cannot forsake them.
There wasn't a Pope, holy priest left in the parish. They tucked up their skirts and ran as far and fast as their legs could carry them.
12 years ago, as today, the highest mortality was amongst those who stayed to tend to the sick.
We grant a special indulgence, free of charge, to all priests and doctors who stand fast and aid the sick. We grant absolution to all in Christendom who, having confessed and being contrite, die without receiving last rites. People of Avignon, do not leave your relatives unburied in the streets. Because of the lack of carters, we consecrate the Rhone River so that bodies may be sunk in it.
But 13 years ago, as the pestilence tightened its grip on Europe, many believed the church had failed them. They looked for more direct ways to prove to God that they repented the sins of the world. Throughout Germany, groups of penitents, calling themselves flagellantes, toured the towns and villages, preaching that plague would cease if they took on Christ's own suffering.
God was angry at human beings for their pride, ostentation, and blasphemy, for neglecting the Sabbath and the Friday fast, but most of all, for adultery and usury. So God decided to destroy the world with a terrible plague. His mind was made up. But then the Blessed Virgin and the angels fell at his feet and begged him to give us one last chance. That's why we're here today, to prove our innocence with blood.
The flagellants weren't alone in finding a common scapegoat. As plague struck north through Europe, those still unaffected looked desperately for anything that could be blamed for the divine wrath.
It was the Jews poisoning the wells, wanting to finish off what they started when they killed Jesus.
The Jews killed our Lord! And thank you, God's vengeance for letting them live among us! Kill them!
Kill them!
Kill the Jews! Kill them!
We spared the children young enough to be brought up as Christians. Then we set on fire these buildings. It's been happening all over. Basel, Mainz, Zurich, Strasbourg. With the Jews gone, see how quick the plague disappears.
Christians who blame the pestilence on the Jews have been seduced by that liar, the devil. The massacre of Jews is a horrible thing and will be met in future by excommunication. We offer the shelter of Avignon to any Jews who want it, and we urge all clergy to do the same.
This time there have been some scattered reports of anti-Jewish pogroms, but now most people know the pestilence is a scourge laid equally on all men.
And have there been any similar flagellant movements in the last few months?
Not really. A few may still survive in primitive villages, but I doubt if anyone takes them seriously. Their bloodletting didn't work. The plague still came, and the flagellants died along with everyone else.
Thank you, Ciboletto. With much of Europe stricken by the plague, there is another question. is there any place that's safe? We'll take you to one country that so far has been untouched by the disease when we come back.
It's a great big world if you don't know your way around. Don't you wish you had a travel book you could rely on? Travels by Sir John Mandeville. Travels for the Discriminating Traveler. First published in 1357 and never out of date.
In just a few minutes now, Pope Innocent will be making what's billed as an important statement about the pestilence, and we'll be carrying it live for you. Meanwhile, there's late word from Venice that 800 people have died there just since sunrise today. And another ominous note, in France, the city of Calais is now reporting its first cases of plague. Calais, of course, is just across the channel from England, which so far has escaped the plague. But this report could heighten fears that the disease will strike there next. Owen of Carnarvon is near Maidstone in England. Owen?
Sebastian is the patron saint of plague. The wounds he suffered from the arrows of the Romans are seen to be similar to the marks of the pestilence. This was painted by an elderly monk 12 years ago at a time when plague killed the entire village. The monk was the last person here left alive, and after completing the painting, he too died. Since then, this tiny chapel has become a place of pilgrimage for local people who believe that St. Sebastian, or the relics of the old monk, can answer their prayers and help them attain salvation. Before the plague, this used to be in the middle of a prosperous estate. But so many people died, there were not enough peasants to cultivate the fields, which then reverted to open country. But local people here are luckier than most. They're able to eke out a living, serving pilgrims who call on their way to Thomas Becket's shrine in Canterbury. Pilgrimages have become very popular in the last few years. Pilgrims invoke saints rather than priests to intercede with God on their behalf in their prayers for immortal salvation. Now, with another outbreak of plague possible, no doubt the pilgrims are asking God for deliverance from that as well.
I pray for the state of our poor world. Stand-up are far too lax nowadays. People don't know their place, wanting to be better than they were born. And the violence. Even the pilgrim routes found safe. It would never have happened back in the old king's time.
I've had to double the wages since the last pestilence. And still my serfs just walk off whenever it suits them. And land values, well, they've halved. I mean, all the estates have just been left abandoned. Still, maybe the saint will put in a good word.
By law, serfs are bound to their lord and his land. But with labor so short, there's little anyone can do to keep them. However, many of the peasants who flock to the crowded cities looking for the well-paid jobs everyone talks about have found that city life was very different from what they expected.
Nobles get a good laugh from the saying, kick a peasant and he'll bless you. Bless a peasant and he'll stab you in the back. They're not nice words to use about ordinary God-fearing men. We're as good as them any day.
I heard tell there's plague amongst the Frenchies.
Plague, pah. Well, they need a hang then catch the pestilence. Life's a trial that only wine can cure, and nothing purifies the blood like wine.
You're right, dear. Wine, music, and all the loving you can get. Nobody gets sick on that sort of life.
Wages, freeing yourself from serfdom, a holy pilgrimage to save your soul. These are the everyday concerns of people in England. But if plague does return here, as it has to other parts of Europe, then there is no guarantee that anything will remain the same. In the 12 years since the Great Pestilence, society has undergone major changes. In France, peasant anger has already boiled over. In a revolt that's come to be known as the Jacquerie, thousands went on a 3-week rampage of blood.
But could the same thing happen in England?
Certainly, yes, the same tensions exist here. And of course, with the threat of plague, there is no way of predicting what may happen.
Thank you, Owen. The Catholic Church has stayed relatively quiet throughout the crisis, but in Avignon, France, at this hour, Pope Innocent has just gone out on the steps of the cathedral to address the faithful.
As the threat of pestilence continues to hang over our city, we beseech all of you to cease all sinning and pray and repent hourly. We decree that all churches, will hold a penitential matin service every day until the danger passes.
Our three reporters are standing by with us now. Ciboletto, what's your reaction to the Pope's speech?
I'm afraid it's just more of the same. Pray, repent, sin no more. There's nothing in his speech that will calm the fears of the majority of his people. It will just serve to reinforce the belief that the Church is powerless to explain such divine displeasure.
In the Muslim religion, there is no such contradiction. With no priesthood to stand between men and God, there is no church to shoulder the blame.
There is so much anguish and despair. I have watched a mother throw her child out into the street at the first cough. I've seen another fearlessly cradling two dying children in her arms. This plague brings us out to the best and the worst in us.
And the best and the worst in society. Thank you, Louis. I do wish we could tell you otherwise, but it looks for certain now as if no part of Europe will escape the disease. From the English coast, we've just gotten word of plague deaths in the city of Bristol, the first such fatalities reported in England. This new report, of course, will only add to the despair felt by millions. Medical knowledge apparently useless, the strongest governments powerless, the faithful finding the church helpless to solve their plight. If society's best and brightest cannot stop this pestilence, then surely the social turmoil we've known since the last outbreak is going to get worse. For Timeline, on March 27, 1361, I'm Stephen Bell.
The plague, soon to be called the Black Death, would return generation after generation. Not until the 1800s did Europe's population ever get back to where it was before the plague. With church and civil authorities helpless, the Black Death made survivors question the rules under which they lived. These questions brought change.
Now, it's time for peace and reconciliation.
The Byzantine Emperor, Constantine XI, is presumed dead. The people of Constantinople are braced for reprisal, but Sultan Mehmet is holding out an olive branch.
He has won the war that was so vital to our empire's security, but now he must win the peace.
It's May 29, 1453, and this is Timeline. I'm Stephen Bell for Timeline. For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople was the hub of civilization, the center of an empire that once stretched from Western Europe to Asia. The empire declined, but the city's fortress walls withstood even the mightiest invader until today. Now, Constantinople is no longer the capital of the Roman Empire. It belongs to the Muslim Ottomans. And in an interview with Timeline last night, Constantine appeared to realize the end had come.
It has been said that a man should always be willing to die for his faith, his country, his family, and his sovereign. And now it seems my people will have the chance to die for all four.
Ottoman forces now search for Constantine's body.